You expect me to spend the best years of my life pushing your wheelchair, Michael? Her words came seconds after Michael's quiet confession. He had just told her, sitting rigid in the new black wheelchair, that a gym accident had left him paralyzed from the waist down. The doctors had explained recovery was uncertain, perhaps months, perhaps longer. He had expected shock, maybe tears, maybe a promise of faithfulness. What he received instead was Juliet's cold glare and a voice sharp enough to cut stone. The words cut through the mansion's foyer like a knife, but Juliet didn't stop there. She paced across the marble tiles, her heels clicking like gunfire. You were supposed to be my future power, travel, red carpets. Instead, you expect me to waste away as your nurse? Don't be ridiculous. Michael Johnson, age 44, sat motionless in his wheelchair, hands resting lightly on the armrests. His chest rose and fell once, a measured breath, though his eyes betrayed the deep crack running through him. He had faced hostile investors, ruthless boardrooms, and courtroom battles, but nothing compared to the humiliation of being discarded by the woman he had chosen to marry. Juliet's voice sharpened, mocking now. What do you think people will say? That glamorous Juliet gave up her life to spoon-feed a cripple? I won't do it, Michael. I refuse. No. She seized a heavy glass ornament from the sideboard, an award Michael had been given years earlier for philanthropy, and with a sudden snap of fury, hurled it toward him. Michael, Maya Williams cried out from the hallway. She sprinted into the foyer, sliding across the polished marble. The ornament struck her shoulder before it could hit Michael. Glass shattered, and Maya stumbled, falling to her knees. A bright line of blood streaked across her forearm where a shard had cut her. Stay out of this. Juliet's face twisted with rage. She lunged forward, seized Maya by the hair, and yanked her upward. Maya gasped, the cry escaping her lips raw with pain. Please stop, Maya pleaded, her voice trembling but clear. It was my fault. I stepped in. Don't blame Mr. Johnson, please. He doesn't deserve this. If you feel for the character, give this video a like and comment where you are watching from. Maybe someone near you is watching too. Michael's breath caught. The sight of Maya, trembling yet shielding him with her own body, tore through the hollow space Juliet's cruelty had left behind. His hands clenched the arms of his chair, fury and sorrow colliding in his chest. In that suspended moment, memory washed over him. Hard times translate love, his father had told him only a week ago. They had been seated in the study, the old man's voice deep with conviction. Easy times mistranslate it. If you want to know whether Juliet truly loves you, son, don't look at her smiles in front of cameras. Test her when the lights go out. Let her show you what she is in the dark. Tonight, the dark had come and Juliet's mask had shattered. Michael's gaze shifted from Juliet's contorted face to Maya's. Despite her pain, despite blood glistening on her arm, and Juliet's grip pulling at her scalp, Maya's eyes held only one plea. Protect him. She was begging not for herself but for him. He remembered the small details of the past weeks, Maya rising before dawn to brew his lemon water, quietly adjusting the pillows behind his back, lifting Scout the service dog onto the bed when Michael's strength failed. She had never sought his praise, never asked for recognition. She moved through the house like quiet grace, anchoring his days without fanfare. That was love. Not the glossy promises Juliet had fed to cameras, not the designer dresses and photo ops. Love was this, a woman willing to bleed for him without hesitation. Juliet, Michael said finally, his voice like steel. Let her go. Juliet froze, breathing hard, still gripping Maya's hair. For a heartbeat it seemed she might tighten her hold. But then, with a hiss of disgust, she shoved Maya away. Maya stumbled, catching herself on the edge of the side table, wincing as her injured arm brushed against it. Scout growled low in his throat, pressing against Michael's legs protectively. Juliet snatched up her purse, eyes blazing. You're pathetic, she spat. Both of you. Keep your little servant. Maybe she'll be better company than I ever was. She stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the chandelier trembled. The silence afterward was deafening. Broken glass glittered on the marble like scattered stars, red wine spreading across the floor in slow rivers. Michael wheeled himself forward an inch, his breath steady but heavy. Maya, he said softly. She was still on her knees, clutching her bleeding arm, her chest heaving. She raised her eyes to him, dark, pained, yet steady. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I couldn't let her hurt you." Michael stared at her. Every line of his father's warning, every doubt he had buried about Juliet, every quiet act of devotion Maya had offered in silence, they all collided in this moment. "You don't have to apologize," he said, his voice firm, resonant. "You've done more for me tonight than she ever did." Maya blinked, startled by the weight of his words. She pressed the hem of her sleeve against the cut on her arm, trying to staunch the bleeding, and lowered her gaze. Michael turned his chair slightly toward the wide bay window. Los Angeles sprawled beneath them, the city humming with neon and engines, laughter and loneliness. Inside the mansion, shards and stains testified to betrayal but also to loyalty, fierce and unspoken. He recalled again his father's voice. "Easy times mistranslate love, hard times reveal it." Tonight, Michael understood. Juliet's contempt had been translated. So had Maya's sacrifice. The chipped glass of water she had set out for him earlier still sat on the low table. He reached for it now, lifting it to his lips, letting the imperfect rim press against him. Broken, yet still holding. "Maya," he said quietly, not turning from the window. "You'll stay?" Despite the pain in her scalp and the sting of her wound, she straightened, nodded once. "I'll stay." And with those words, the mansion no longer felt empty. The next morning broke gray over Los Angeles, the sky heavy with marine layer that rolled in from the Pacific. Michael Johnson had not slept much. He had replayed Juliet's departure again and again in his mind, the words, the smash of glass, Maya's cry when her skin was cut. Each time, he found himself staring into the ceiling of his bedroom, listening to the faint whir of the chair's motor when he shifted positions, the sound of a life he had not expected. By 7, he was dressed in a dark suit, one chosen not for cameras but for dignity. Maya insisted on accompanying him to the hospital for his scheduled follow-up, her arm wrapped in a bandage from the previous night. He had protested that she needed rest, but she only shook her head. "You shouldn't face them alone," she said simply. There had been no argument after that. The drive down to Cedars-Sinai was quiet except for the murmur of the news on the radio. Reporters speculated about his accident, about whether the wedding would still happen, about the Johnson Foundation's next gala. The voices blurred together. Empty conjecture that Michael let wash over him. His father's words were louder in his mind. Hard times translate love. Inside the hospital, the private wing was hushed, a place designed for discretion and wealth. White walls gleamed under recessed lights. Nurses moved briskly but with soft voices, and security stood at the ends of corridors like silent sentinels. Waiting in the consultation suite were 2 men, his personal attorney, Grant Davis, and his longtime physician, Dr. Harold Lane. His father, Mr. Johnson, was also present, seated with the composure of a man who had faced more battles than he could count. He rose when Michael wheeled in, embracing his son with a strong hand on his shoulder. "Michael," the elder Johnson said quietly, "you look steadier than I feared." Michael managed a faint smile. Steady on the outside. Maya lingered near the door, uncertain if she belonged in such a room of authority. She looked out of place among tailored suits and polished shoes, but her presence anchored him more than anyone else. Grant Davis cleared his throat, opening a thick folder of documents. "Mr. Johnson, we need to formalize the parameters of your situation. The press has already begun speculating about the permanence of your condition. To protect your holdings and the foundation, we must control the narrative carefully." Michael's eyes narrowed. "Control the narrative," he repeated. "You mean lie." Grant gave a cautious smile. "Spin, not lie. We state that your doctors are pursuing aggressive therapy, that outcomes are uncertain but optimistic. That way, you maintain investor confidence while keeping personal matters private." "Doctor," Lane leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Medically, you're not permanently paralyzed, but recovery will take time, and you asked me to keep this condition ambiguous." His voice softened. "Michael, you asked me to play along so you could test Juliet. I want to be clear professionally. I do not recommend pretending longer than necessary." Michael's father interjected. The test has already spoken. Juliet failed. But the world does not need to know the details yet. What matters is how you use the lesson. Michael rubbed his temple, exhaustion pulling at him. He remembered Juliet's words, her contempt, the object sailing across the room. Maya's body interposed like a shield. The contrast was too sharp to ignore. Grant tapped the folder. Sir, what's at stake here isn't only personal. If investors believe you are permanently incapacitated, they may attempt to maneuver control of the Johnson Group. There are board members who would seize any opportunity. We need a firm statement today. Michael looked at his father. And what do you think? The older man's face was carved with lines of experience, but his eyes were steady. I think truth eventually comes to light. But timing matters. Right now, you should let the world underestimate you. See who remains loyal, who sharpens their knives. In the meantime, decide where your own loyalty lies. Michael's gaze shifted to Maya, still quiet near the door. Her bandage peeked from under her sleeve. She caught his eyes for a moment, then looked down quickly, as if afraid she had overstepped by meeting them at all. He remembered her cry, her plea that Juliet not blame him, her willingness to bleed for his safety. He spoke finally, his voice firm. We'll say I'm under therapy. Nothing more. Nothing less. Uncertain outcome. I want NDAs for all staff. No leaks from this wing. No photographs beyond what we approve. I will continue appearing at board meetings remotely. And the foundation work continues unchanged. Grant nodded briskly, already scribbling notes. Yes, sir. Dr. Lane hesitated. Michael, be cautious. The body listens to the mind. If you convince the world you're broken, sometimes your body follows. Michael allowed a small, grim smile. Then I'll make sure the world sees only what I permit, but I won't let them dictate my spirit. His father leaned back, folding his hands. That's the son I know. The conversation shifted to practicalities, schedules for physical therapy, security details, the language for the official statement. Michael listened, but his mind drifted. He thought of Juliet's laughter at parties, her hand on his arm for photographs, her absence in his darkest night. He thought of Maya's soft words in the kitchen, her early morning care, the way she stayed after Juliet left, saying only, I'll stay. As the meeting drew to a close, Grant asked, Shall we issue the statement this afternoon? Michael nodded. Do it. Maya finally spoke, her voice cautious. Mr. Johnson, forgive me if it isn't my place. But are you sure? Once the statement is out, people will look at you differently. They'll judge. Michael turned his chair toward her. They already do. Let them. I would rather be judged for appearing weak than for betraying myself. She bowed her head slightly, chastened. But he saw gratitude flicker in her eyes. She was not used to being heard in rooms like this. His father rose, placing both hands on Michael's shoulders. Remember, son, Juliet revealed herself because of this test. But the real revelation isn't hers. It's yours. What you choose to build from here will define the rest of your life. On the ride home, the marine layer began to lift, sunlight pushing through over the hills. Michael watched the city roll past the coffee shops, the bus stops, the ordinary lives carrying on. His chest felt heavy, but not with despair. With clarity, Maya sat quietly beside him, clutching a small first aid kit she insisted on keeping close. The bandage on her arm had spotted red, but she did not complain. She gazed out the window, the wind brushing strands of hair across her cheek. Michael studied her reflection in the glass. He realized then that loyalty didn't announce itself in grand speeches. It revealed itself in quiet endurance, in wounds carried without protest. In the simple words, I'll stay. As the car climbed back toward the mansion, Michael resolved that the test his father had urged had done more than expose Juliet's false love. It had also uncovered the true heart of someone he had almost overlooked, and he was determined never to overlook her again. The mansion was quieter than it had ever been. Days after the hospital meeting, the grand rooms of Michael Johnson's Hollywood Hills estate carried a kind of hush that even the city's noise below couldn't breach. Juliet's perfume no longer lingered on the stairwell. Her laughter didn't echo through the halls. What remained was the steady rhythm of Maya Williams moving through the house, her footsteps soft, her hands always busy with something practical. Michael had noticed her before, of course, but only in passing. She had worked for Juliet's family for years and occasionally filled shifts at his estate when needed. To him, she had been efficient, respectful, invisible, in the way good staff often were. But since Juliet's violent exit, Maya had stepped into the light. He saw now the quiet gravity she carried, the devotion she poured into every task. Each morning began the same. At dawn, Maya brought him a glass of lemon water, always fresh, always chilled just enough to wake the senses. She helped him through the motions of preparing for the day, adjusting the rails in the bathroom, setting out clean clothes, arranging the medications in neat little rows. Her movements were precise but never hurried. She did not chatter. She did not complain. She worked with the steady patience of someone who believed every small act mattered. Michael observed her with an attentiveness that surprised him. He watched the way she tied her hair back before leaning over to lift a pillow, how she whispered to Scout, the service dog, as though he were a child, how she checked the wheelchair's brakes twice before letting him transfer from bed. These were details Juliet had never touched, never cared to understand. One morning, as she adjusted the sling that helped shift him into his chair, he broke the silence. "Maya, why do you always start with lemon water?" She glanced at him, a flicker of surprise in her dark eyes. "My grandmother used to say it cleans the night out of you. It helps you face the day with a clear spirit." Michael let the words settle. There was wisdom in them, old and unpretentious. He took a sip and felt, for the first time in days, the faint spark of comfort. Later that week, he insisted on being wheeled into the garden. The sun warmed his face, and for a moment he closed his eyes, listening to the wind rustle through the lemon trees. Maya knelt nearby, trimming dead leaves, humming under her breath. When he opened his eyes, he caught her watching him, her gaze quickly diverted when she realized. "You hum when you work," he remarked. She flushed slightly. "It helps me keep pace." "What tune?" "Just something my mother used to sing in church. A hymn, I suppose." "Zilly." He nodded, remembering the Sundays of his own childhood, his mother's voice rising in song. For years he had drowned out those memories with work, money, noise. Now, in the quiet, they returned. Evenings were more difficult. The pain in his legs flared, muscles stiffened, and he found himself restless, irritable. Juliet would have left him to the night staff, or pretended not to notice. Maya stayed. She sat with him during the therapy exercises, counting aloud as he struggled to lift his legs an inch from the chair's footrests. She offered encouragement, never pity. One night, when frustration boiled over, he slammed his fist against the armrest. "What's the point? Why pretend this will change?" Maya startled but didn't retreat. Instead, she crouched beside him, her voice steady. "Because pretending is the first step toward believing. And believing is the first step toward healing." Her words stung with their simplicity. He turned his face away, ashamed of his outburst, but she didn't leave. She only placed the lemon water on the table and said, "I'll see you in the morning, Mr. Johnson." As the days blended, Michael found himself looking for her presence even when she wasn't in the room. He listened for the sound of her footsteps, the gentle clink of dishes, the murmur of her voice as she spoke to Scout. She had become the pulse of the house, steady, reliable, impossible to ignore. One afternoon, he watched from his study window as she carried groceries up the long drive. The bags were heavy, her arm still wrapped from the cut Juliet had inflicted, yet she didn't complain. When Scout barked from the porch, she laughed softly, shifting the weight to scratch his head. Michael felt something stir in his chest, an unfamiliar blend of admiration and guilt. She deserved more than servitude, more than carrying someone else's burdens. Yet here she was, carrying his without hesitation. That evening, as she bandaged her arm again, he said quietly, "You shouldn't have had to protect me that night. It wasn't your place." She looked up, startled. "If it wasn't my place, then whose was it?" The question lingered. He had no answer. Maya tied off the bandage and stood. "You don't need to thank me, Mr. Johnson. Protecting people, it's the only thing I know how to do." Michael watched her leave the room, her silhouette framed in the doorway. He thought about the many people in his life who had claimed to love him, who had vowed loyalty, who had smiled for photographs and clinked glasses at galas. None of them had stepped between him and harm. None had bled for him. The mansion felt different now. It was still vast and echoing, but where it once had been a stage for Juliet's performances, it had become something else. A place where small acts of devotion wove themselves into a fabric stronger than any public vow. Lying awake that night, Michael replayed the sound of Maya's voice as she said, "If it wasn't my place, then whose was it?" He realized that the answer to that question might change the course of his life. In the silence, Scout shifted at the foot of his bed, letting out a low sigh. Michael reached down to scratch the dog's head, the action calming him. He remembered his father's words again, hard times translate love. Perhaps he had misjudged where love lived. It wasn't in champagne toasts or staged photographs. It was here, in the quiet of the night, in the care of a woman who hummed hymns under her breath and carried lemon water at dawn. Michael closed his eyes, not with despair this time, but with the faintest sense of peace. The fracture in his life remained, but he could feel the edges pressing together, held by something stronger than glass. By the end of the second week, the silence of the mansion could no longer shield Michael Johnson from the noise outside. Los Angeles was buzzing. News anchors speculated about his accident, talk shows debated whether Juliet had abandoned him, and tabloids printed photographs of her in designer gowns, attending parties without him. To the public, the narrative was simple. The billionaire was broken, and the fiancée had moved on. But inside the house, where Maya's quiet routines continued to anchor his days, Michael knew the story was far more complicated. It began on a Monday morning with a call from the Johnson Group's board. Grant Davis, his attorney, connected the video conference on the wide screen in the study. 10 faces appeared in neat squares, polished and impatient. Behind them gleamed the modern glass walls of downtown offices. "Mr. Johnson," the chairman said, his tone brisk. "The markets are unsettled. Investors are concerned about your condition. We need clarity." Michael sat straighter in his chair, Scout at his side, Maya standing discreetly just outside the camera's view. "You have clarity," he replied. "I remain chairman and active in all operations. The foundation's initiatives continue. My condition is temporary." A woman from the board adjusted her glasses. "With respect, the public believes otherwise. Rumors of permanent disability are affecting confidence. Some are asking if you intend to step down." Michael's jaw tightened. "No one should mistake my injury for incapacity. My role stands." The meeting dragged for an hour, with veiled suggestions that he appoint interim leadership, that he make a stronger statement, that he prove his stability. When the screen finally went black, Michael exhaled hard. "They're circling," he muttered. From the doorway, Maya spoke softly. "Like vultures?" He looked up, startled by her candor. Then, unexpectedly, he chuckled. "Yes, exactly like vultures." That evening, the pressure continued. Juliet's social media posts flooded tabloids, pictures of her at a Malibu beach house, laughing with friends, a champagne flute raised high. The captions were artfully vague about freedom, about not being chained to anyone's misfortune. Commentators read between the lines with glee. Grant arrived late, carrying a folder of clippings. He dropped them on the table with a thud. "She's building a narrative. That you're pitiable. That she escaped before your decline ruined her life. The press loves it. If you don't respond, that's the story that sticks." Michael pinched the bridge of his nose. "I won't play her game." "You don't have to," Grant said smoothly. "But we need optics, photos, proof of strength. A gala appearance. Anything that shows you're still in control." "I just got out of therapy an hour ago," Michael snapped. "I can barely stand without braces. And you want me smiling for cameras?" Grant leaned closer, lowering his voice. "This is bigger than pride. The public face of strength holds your empire together. Without it, we risk hostile takeovers." Michael's father, who had joined them for dinner, spoke quietly. "Son, sometimes silence is strength, but other times, silence is surrender. Decide which this island." Maya, clearing dishes at the sideboard, froze for a moment, then continued her work. She didn't look at Michael, but he knew she was listening. Everyone was. Later that night, he wheeled himself into the terrace overlooking the city. Maya followed with a blanket draped over her arm. She laid it across his shoulders without a word. They stood there, the hum of Los Angeles rising like a tide, helicopters tracing lines of light through the sky. "Do you think I look weak?" Michael asked suddenly. Maya hesitated. "You look human. Is that enough?" She met his eyes, unflinching. "For people who love you, yes. For the rest, they'll always want a show." He considered that. Juliet had always given the world a show. Maybe that was why she fit the cameras better than she ever fit the quiet of his home. 2 days later, the board's fears materialized in headlines. Johnson Empire in jeopardy, wedding called off, billionaire in decline. Photographers staked out the mansion gates, their lenses like rifles waiting for a glimpse of him. Michael ordered the security team to push them back, but Maya couldn't ignore the frenzy when she went to the market. She returned with groceries and the weight of strangers' whispers. At the checkout, she'd heard 2 women muttering about Juliet's escape, one of them saying, "I'd never stick around either. Imagine wasting your life on a man in a chair." When she recounted it to Michael that evening, her voice carried more pain than she wanted him to hear. "They don't know you," she said. "They don't see you fight every day. They only see the chair." "No." He studied her face, the lines of exhaustion, the quiet fire in her eyes. "And what do you see?" She swallowed, lowering her gaze. "I see someone worth standing beside." The words struck him deeper than any headline. He wanted to ask her why, to demand what she truly felt. But the moment passed, as she turned to Scout and ruffled his ears. That weekend, Grant returned with a plan. "We'll host a private reception for the foundation. Limited press, controlled photos. We show you leading the board, speaking with donors. You don't need to stand, only to appear unbroken." Michael hesitated. The thought of cameras probing his every movement made his stomach tighten. But he also remembered his father's warning silence could become surrender. Perhaps he couldn't ignore optics any longer. He agreed reluctantly. On the night of the reception, the mansion gleamed. The terrace was strung with lights, catering staff moved swiftly, and the city's elite gathered with practiced smiles. Michael maneuvered through the crowd, Maya discreetly by his side. Scout at his heel. The guests offered handshakes, compliments, cautious glances at the chair. When Michael rose to speak, the hum of conversation hushed. He gripped the microphone, steady despite the braces beneath his trousers. "The Johnson Foundation has always been about resilience," he began, "about believing in recovery, even when the world doubts you. I intend to continue that mission not from the sidelines, but from the front." The applause came, polite but real. Cameras clicked. For a moment, Michael felt the power of optics, the illusion of control crafted for those who needed it. But when he glanced to the edge of the terrace, he saw Maya watching him, her expression unreadable. Not admiration, not pity, something steadier, truer. She knew the speech was performance. She also knew what no one else in that glittering crowd could see: the bruises from therapy, the sleepless nights, the quiet determination that came not from headlines but from survival. Later, as the guests drifted out and the lights dimmed, Michael sat with Maya in the kitchen, eating leftover sliders from the caterers. No tuxedos, no cameras, just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint sound of Scout snoring. "Did it work?" Maya asked. Michael chewed thoughtfully. "For them, yes. For me, I don't know." She tilted her head. "Maybe you don't need to prove anything to them." He looked at her, really looked. "Then who do I need to prove it to?" Maya didn't answer. She only pushed the plate closer to him, as though to remind him that not all battles were fought under spotlights. Some were fought here, in the quiet, with food shared at a kitchen counter. Michael leaned back, the taste of salt and onion lingering. Outside, the city pulsed with its endless hunger for spectacle. Inside, he realized, the truth was waiting, steady, as the woman across from him. The morning after the reception, sunlight spilled over the Hollywood Hills, cutting through the marine haze. Michael sat in his study, the wheelchair positioned near the wide windows. The city below glimmered, relentless in its movement, but inside he felt a weight heavier than the chair itself. The event had gone as Grant predicted. Applause, headlines, photographs of resilience. Yet when he woke, there was no satisfaction, only emptiness. Optics had worked for the world, but they hadn't worked for his heart. Maya entered quietly, carrying his lemon water. She set it on the desk without a word, then began straightening the papers Grant had left behind. She always moved with a kind of respectful invisibility. But Michael noticed her every detail, the small bandage she still wore beneath her sleeve, the way she hummed softly under her breath when she thought no one was listening. "Maya," he said suddenly. She looked up, startled. "Yes, sir?" "Sit with me a moment." She hesitated, then pulled a chair across from him. Scout shifted at her feet, content as if he belonged to her as much as to him. Michael studied hair. "Last night worked for the cameras, but it didn't work for me. I realized I was still pretending, still covering." "You weren't covering," she said softly. "You were leading. People needed to see you strong." "Strong," he repeated, almost bitterly. "Or staged." She didn't argue. Instead, she lowered her gaze, folding her hands in her lap. He saw a flush of honesty in her silence, and it cut him deeper than any polished praise from donors. Later that afternoon, Juliet called. Her voice, bright with false cheer, poured through the speaker. "Michael, darling, I've been thinking. Maybe I was too harsh. I might be willing to visit. Just to talk." Michael listened, jaw tightening. "Visit?" he repeated. "Yes, but not if you expect me to live there. I can't put my life on hold. You understand." His silence stretched. In that pause, he remembered the glass ornament hurled across the foyer. Maya's blood on the marble. Juliet's hand in her hair. He remembered Maya's voice begging Juliet not to blame him. The contrast was unbearable. "Juliet," he said finally, his voice even, "if you want to be part of my life, then you need to live that life with me. Here. Fully." The cheer in her tone cracked. "Michael, don't be unreasonable. I have commitments, campaigns, appearances. You can't ask me to give that up." "I can," he replied, his voice firm. "Because anything less isn't marriage. Move in, or don't bother calling again." "Loh." There was a sharp inhale, then a brittle laugh. "You've changed. This isn't the man I fell in love with." "No," he said quietly. "This is the man I've always been. You just didn't see it." The call ended with a click. Michael sat still, staring at the silent phone. Maya hovered at the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You heard," he said. She nodded once. "I didn't mean to. It doesn't matter." He exhaled. "She won't come. Not really. She never intended to." "Oh." Maya took a tentative step closer. "You gave her the chance. That's all anyone can do." He looked at her, really looked. "And yet you're here. You stay when you don't have to." Her cheeks flushed, but her voice was steady. "Because someone has to." That evening, his father visited. Mr. Johnson settled into the leather armchair by the fireplace, his presence filling the room with quiet authority. "I heard about Juliet," he said. Michael nodded. "She won't move in. She won't risk her life for mine." His father studied him carefully. "And what does that tell you?" "That the test is working," Michael admitted. Mr. Johnson leaned forward. "Exactly. But son, you must also recognize the other side of the test. Not only who fails, but who passes." Michael's gaze drifted toward Maya, who was in the kitchen preparing tea. He thought of the countless mornings she had risen before dawn, of the bandages she had wrapped, the insults she had endured to protect him. He thought of her words the night of the reception. "I see someone worth standing beside." When she returned with the tray, Mr. Johnson smiled at her. "You've been caring for my son with devotion. It doesn't go unnoticed." Maya's eyes widened, and she lowered them quickly. "I only do what's needed, sir." "No. Sometimes what's needed," the elder Johnson said gently, "is the greatest gift of all." That night, after his father left, Michael wheeled himself onto the terrace. Maya followed as she always did, a blanket folded over her arm. She draped it across his shoulders, her fingers brushing his sleeve. The contact was brief but electric. "Why do you do it, Maya?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. "Do what?" "Stay. Care. Bleed, even. You could walk away any time, and yet you don't." That. Her throat worked as she searched for words. "Because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. Because leaving someone alone in their hardest hour. That isn't who I am." He studied her, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't yet name. In her answer, he heard no performance, no optics, only truth. The city lights glittered below, cameras flashing somewhere in the distance, Juliet's curated life still making headlines. But here, in the quiet of his terrace, Michael realized the question was no longer about whether Juliet would move in. The real question was whether he could allow himself to see what was already before him, the steadfast presence of a woman who had passed the test without even knowing she was taking it. As the night deepened, Scout curled at Maya's feet, the blanket warm across Michael's shoulders. For the first time in weeks, he felt something close to peace. Juliet's absence no longer felt like a loss. It felt like clarity. He turned his chair slightly toward Maya. "Thank you," he said simply. She tilted her head, confused. "For what?" "For staying." Maya's eyes softened, and she whispered, "Always." Michael looked back out over the city, his father's words echoing once more. Hard times translate love. And now, he thought, love had begun to translate itself in ways he had never imagined. The first true week without Juliet began with silence. Not the silence of anger, not the tense hush of an argument waiting to explode, but the clean silence that follows a storm. The mansion no longer smelled of her perfume or echoed with her clipped laughter. Instead, it carried the faint scent of lemon from the trees in the garden and the soft rhythm of Maya's careful movements as she began another morning. Michael Johnson sat in his chair near the breakfast nook, staring at the headlines spread across his tablet. Juliet had already given her version of events to a glossy magazine. She hadn't mentioned the fight, the glass, or Maya's injury. Instead, she played the role of a woman who had been forced to choose between freedom and captivity. "I had to protect my future," the headline read. The world sympathized, of course. It always did with her beauty and her talent for spinning tragedy into self-promotion. Michael's fingers tightened on the tablet until Scout nudged his knee with a wet nose. He lowered the screen and let out a long breath. Across the kitchen, Maya set down a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. She placed a glass of lemon water beside it, her bandaged arm still stiff, though she made no complaint. "Eat," she said simply. He looked at her. "You don't have to do all this." She raised one brow. "Do you want to argue on an empty stomach?" For the first time that morning, he smiled. It wasn't a wide smile, but it was real. He picked up the fork and ate slowly, listening to her hum as she moved about the kitchen. It struck him again how her presence filled the house in a way Juliet's never had. Juliet had taken up space. Maya gave it warmth. Later that day, his father visited. The elder Johnson arrived in his tailored gray suit, carrying the scent of old cologne and authority. He sat opposite Michael in the study, his hands folded over his cane. "Son," he said after a long pause, "you've come to the edge of the test." Juliet revealed her truth. "Now you must decide whether to step fully into this new life or retreat back to pretense." Michael rubbed his temples. "And if I retreat, you'll live half a life, half honest, half hidden. That isn't the man your mother raised." Michael turned toward the window. Outside, Maya was in the garden, coaxing Scout into a game of fetch with a tennis ball. The dog bounded across the grass, and she laughed, a sound so unguarded it cut through his doubts. "I'm afraid," he admitted quietly. His father's voice softened. "Of what?" "Losing Juliet. She's already gone. Afraid of being seen as weak? You were never more a man than the night you endured her cruelty without breaking. What else is there to fear?" Michael's gaze followed Maya as she bent to scoop up the ball, her bandage stark against her dark skin. He thought of her shielding him, bleeding for him. His voice was low but steady. "I'm afraid of what happens if I admit how much she matters." His father studied him. "Then perhaps that is the fear you need to cross." That evening, Michael called a household meeting with Grant and Dr. Lane present. Maya stood quietly at the edge of the room, assuming she wasn't meant to be part of it. But Michael gestured for her to stay. "I've decided," he said firmly. "For the next months, I will live as though this condition is permanent. No exceptions. The board will see me in the chair. The press will see me in the chair. The world will see me in the chair. If they try to exploit weakness, let them try. I won't stage recovery or hide behind optics. I'll meet this as I am." Grant frowned. "Sir, that may damage confidence." Michael's jaw set. "Confidence built on illusion is no confidence at all." Dr. Lane sighed but nodded. "If this is your choice, then we'll structure the therapy accordingly, but you must prepare for the scrutiny." Michael looked at Maya. She didn't flinch from his gaze. Instead, she gave the slightest nod, as if to say, "I'll stand with you." After the meeting, Maya walked him out to the terrace. The air smelled of jasmine and distant ocean. She adjusted the blanket across his lap, her fingers brushing his wrist. "You're certain?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he replied. "It's the only way forward. No more pretending." She hesitated, then said softly, "Pretending isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's protection." He turned to her. "And what about truth?" Her eyes held his. "Truth is what you can live with when the lights are out." He let the words settle. Scout lay at their feet, sighing into the evening. The city below glowed with restless energy, but here, under the quiet sky, Michael felt the weight of a threshold crossed. The following days tested him. Without Juliet's glamour to shield him, every appearance was dissected. Paparazzi shouted questions from beyond the gates. Headlines speculated about the company's succession. At board meetings, colleagues studied him with thinly veiled doubt. Yet through it all, Maya's steady presence kept him balanced. She managed the smallest details, the angle of a chair, the placement of his notes, the quiet encouragement whispered before a call began. One night, after a grueling session of therapy, Michael nearly collapsed from exhaustion. He cursed under his breath, furious at his body's limitations. Maya knelt beside him, her hands firm as she adjusted the braces. "You think weakness defines you," she said quietly, "but I see something else." "What?" His voice was ragged. "Endurance," she answered. "Endurance is strength too." For a long moment, they stayed there, her hand steadying his knee, his breath harsh in the silence. Something unspoken passed between them, as real as any vow. When she finally rose, she smoothed her apron and whispered, "I'll bring lemon water." Michael watched her go, his chest tightening. He realized that crossing the threshold wasn't only about accepting the chair. It was about accepting what her presence meant, about facing the truth his father had told him to seek. That night, as he looked out over the glittering city, he thought of Juliet's laughter fading into distance and Maya's voice steady at his side. The contrast was clear, undeniable. The storm had passed. The real journey had begun. The days that followed took on a rhythm neither Michael nor Maya had expected. Life in the mansion had shifted into something quieter, more deliberate. A cadence shaped less by spectacle and more by survival. Michael, determined to live openly as though his paralysis were permanent, found that each day carried small humiliations buttons that slipped from his grasp, doors that resisted the chair, stares that reminded him of limits he refused to accept. But alongside the frustrations were small mercies, and most of them came from Maya. Each morning she appeared before sunrise, carrying the lemon water that had become their ritual. She had stopped bandaging her arm in front of him, though he still caught glimpses of the healing cut whenever her sleeve rode up. It reminded him of the night she had stepped between him and Juliet's rage, a memory that returned at the strangest times. She would set the glass down, humming softly under her breath, then go about adjusting his medication, arranging the day's appointments, and ensuring Scout's food and leash were ready. Michael began to notice her quiet instincts. When his hands shook trying to cut food, she slipped a fork with a modified grip onto his plate without comment. When his chair snagged on the thick rug in the hallway, she adjusted the edges so he wouldn't have to call for help. When fatigue made his voice sharp, she never flinched, never retaliated. Instead, she waited until his frustration passed, then resumed her work as though nothing had happened. One morning she suggested fresh air. "You've been staring at those screens too long," she said, nodding toward the tablet filled with board memos. "There's a trail at Griffith Park that's wheelchair accessible. Scout would like it." He hesitated, imagining paparazzi with long lenses hiding in the brush. but something in her steady gaze persuaded him. By mid-morning, they were outside, the city sprawling beneath them. The trail wound gently through oak and sycamore, sunlight dappling the pavement. Scout trotted ahead, tail high, ears twitching at every sound. Michael felt exposed at first, rolling along in the chair under the open sky, but Maya walked beside him without hurry. She pointed out wildflowers at the edge of the path, told him stories about childhood field trips, her voice weaving a tapestry of memory that softened the edges of his discomfort. When they passed an elderly couple with walking sticks, the man tipped his cap. The woman smiled warmly, and for a brief moment Michael felt less like a spectacle and more like a man simply moving through the world. Afterward, they stopped at a small diner on Los Feliz Boulevard. Maya ordered a vanilla milkshake and fries, insisting they split both. "It's a tradition," she explained. "When I was a kid, Fridays after school, my mom would buy one shake for all of us. We each got 2 sips, 3 if she was feeling generous." Michael laughed, the sound surprising him. He dipped a fry into the shake at her urging and shook his head. "That's barbaric. Try it before you judge." He did, grimaced, then laughed again. Still barbaric, but not terrible. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes, refilled their water glasses and whispered as she leaned close, "You two make a good team." The words lingered with Michael long after they left. Back at the mansion, Maya settled him into the study while she unpacked groceries. He watched from the doorway as she moved through the kitchen with easy familiarity, humming again, Scout trailing her as though he were her shadow. It struck him that her presence had become the pulse of his home, her small kindnesses stitching each day into something bearable. That evening, as the sun lowered, a knock sounded at the door. It was the retired couple from down the hill, neighbors he barely knew. They carried a casserole dish wrapped in foil. "Thought you might need a break from fancy meals," the man said with a grin. "This one's old family recipe." Michael thanked them, surprised by the gesture. After they left, he and Maya shared the casserole at the kitchen island. It was simple, no truffle oil, no imported spices, just ground beef, noodles, and cheese baked until the edges crisped. But it tasted like comfort, like community. "Do you miss them?" Maya asked quietly. "Who?" "The days before all this, the way people used to look at you." Michael considered. "I thought I would, but maybe they didn't really see me at all. Maybe they only saw the fortune, the image." She nodded, her eyes downcast. "Sometimes people only look at what shines. They don't want to notice what's real." He studied her for a long moment, then said, "You notice." Her cheeks flushed. She busied herself with clearing plates, but he could tell his words had landed. The following day brought another test. As Michael maneuvered through the hallway, a tray of coffee cups slipped from his lap, shattering against the tile. He cursed under his breath, frustration boiling. Maya hurried in, kneeling to gather the shards. A piece sliced her palm, drawing blood. "Stop," he ordered. "You're hurt." She shook her head. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." His voice rose more sharply than he intended. "You can't keep bleeding for me." "Me?" She froze, then looked up, eyes dark with something unreadable. "I don't mind." The room went still. Michael swallowed hard, the weight of her words pressing into him. He wanted to ask what she meant, wanted to demand if she understood the danger of giving so much of herself. But he said nothing, because part of him feared the answer. That night, as he lay awake, the words replayed, "I don't mind." He thought of Juliet, who had minded everything, who had measured every inconvenience against her own gain, and he thought of Maya, who had given without measure, without demand. The difference carved itself deeper into his heart. The next morning, he found her in the garden, Scout at her side. She was tending to the lemon trees, her fingers brushing blossoms with care. He wheeled closer, the early sun warming his shoulders. "You were right," he said. She looked up. "About what?" "About small things, about how they matter." She tilted her head, waiting. "Last night, I realized. All the speeches, the galas, the board meetings, they mean nothing without the small things. Lemon water, fries dipped in milkshakes, neighbors bringing casseroles. Those are the things that tell you who you are. A slow smile spread across her face, and for the first time since his accident, he felt not just endurance, but something like hope. As the city hummed below them, Michael understood that the world would continue to judge him, to doubt him, to devour whatever narrative Juliet fed it. But here, in the rhythm of Maya's small kindnesses, he had found a truth greater than optics. And he knew he would need that truth in the battles still to come. The mansion at night had its own music, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the low click of security cameras, the whisper of wind pushing against glass doors. Michael had grown used to these sounds, though some nights they pressed on him more heavily than others. It was on one of these nights, long after Maya had gone to her small guest room, that something unexpected happened. He sat in the study, a mug of coffee cooling on the side table, his eyes wandering across spreadsheets glowing on the tablet. His body ached from therapy, his wrists sore from the resistance bands, yet his mind refused to rest. He reached for the mug, the edge slipping against his fingers. The liquid sloshed over the rim. On instinct, his body jolted not much, but enough that his legs shifted, muscles firing in ways he hadn't felt in weeks. The movement was small, barely more than a twitch, but it was undeniable. Scout reacted instantly. The service dog sprang up from his rug, ears pricked, tail stiff. He barked once, sharply, as though calling out a secret. Michael froze, the mug trembling in his grip. His heart pounded. He glanced down at his legs, half expecting the movement to continue. But they were still again, motionless as stone. The room seemed to hold its breath. A door opened softly down the hall. Footsteps approached, quick but careful. Maya appeared in the doorway, hair loose around her shoulders, a cardigan thrown over her nightclothes. "What happened?" she asked, her voice low, urgent. Michael hesitated. He could tell her nothing. He could brush it off, but Scout barked again, staring directly at his legs, then at Maya. Her gaze followed the dog's. She looked back at Michael, eyes narrowing slightly. "Did you move?" The question hung between them. He wanted to deny it, to insist she had imagined it. But something in her face stopped him. She wasn't prying, wasn't accusing. She was trying to protect him. Michael set the mug down carefully. It was nothing, just a slip. Maya stepped closer. She crouched beside the chair, her eyes steady. Was it nothing, or was it something you don't want anyone else to know? The truth pressed against his throat. He leaned back, exhaling. If word gets out that I might recover, everything changes. The board will spin it. The press will devour it. Juliet will use it to paint me as a liar. I can't risk it. Maya studied him silently for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to the corner where the small security camera blinked red. Without hesitation, she reached up, slid open the panel, and removed the memory card. She slipped it into her pocket. "Then no one saw a thing," she said simply. Michael stared at her. "You'd do that for me?" Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Protecting you isn't new, Mr. Johnson. You just didn't notice before." He swallowed, the weight of her words striking deeper than he expected. "Maya, why?" She looked away. "Because dignity matters. And because you matter." "Oh." Scout patted over, resting his head on her thigh as if in agreement. She stroked the dog absently, her eyes still avoiding his. Michael leaned forward, his voice softer now. "You realize you've made yourself part of this secret?" "I know," she said. "Secrets can be dangerous, but so can the truth when the world isn't ready for it." For the rest of the night, he couldn't focus on spreadsheets or headlines. His mind kept returning to the brief spark in his legs, the dog's reaction, and Maya's calm decision to erase the evidence. She had made a choice that could cost her everything if it ever came to light. Yet she hadn't hesitated. The following day, he watched her more closely. When she adjusted his lap blanket, when she guided him through stretches, when she scolded Scout gently for begging at the table, he saw the quiet firmness in her. She wasn't simply a caretaker. She had become his guardian, not of his body alone but of his dignity, his very story. That evening, as the sun set orange over the hills, Michael wheeled himself into the living room. Maya was setting out dinner, simple roast chicken with vegetables. He watched her move, graceful even in the most ordinary tasks. "You didn't ask me why I erased the footage," she said suddenly, without looking up. Michael blinked. "You already told me." "Number." She glanced at him then, her eyes steady. "I told you it was to protect you, but that wasn't the only reason." He waited. She placed the serving spoon down carefully. "Because I've seen people lose everything when the truth came out too soon. My brother, he got caught up in trouble years ago. He wasn't guilty, but he couldn't prove it fast enough. By the time the truth surfaced, the damage was done. I won't let that happen to you." Michael's chest tightened. He had never heard her speak of family before. "What happened to him?" Her lips pressed together. "He left. Started over somewhere far away. We don't talk much." She shook her head, as if to push away the memory. "But I learned then. Sometimes silence is the only shield we have." Michael's voice was low. "And now you're my shield." She didn't answer, but the way she carried herself said more than words. That night, lying awake again, he thought of Juliet's betrayal and Maya's sacrifice. Juliet had thrown glass at him without a second thought. Maya had stepped in its path. Juliet had twisted his weakness into a performance for sympathy. Maya had hidden his flicker of strength to preserve his choice. The difference was stark and undeniable. In the darkness, Scout shifted at the foot of the bed, ears flicking as if still remembering the night before. Michael reached down to scratch his head. "Good boy," he murmured. But he knew the real guard in this house wasn't the dog. It was the woman down the hall, who had decided his secret was worth keeping even if it cost her everything. The city outside pulsed with gossip and hunger, but inside, a fragile alliance had formed. For the first time since the accident, Michael realized he wasn't facing the battle alone. Juliet's mother lived in a penthouse off Wilshire, all glass walls and sharp corners. The place smelled faintly of orchids and expensive candles, and it was there that Juliet sought refuge after weeks of avoiding Michael's calls. She arrived with sunglasses pushed high on her head, her phone buzzing nonstop with notifications from social media. Her mother, Clarissa, poured 2 glasses of Chardonnay before Juliet had even set her purse down. "You look tired," Clarissa observed, though her tone carried more judgment than concern. Juliet sank onto the leather sofa. "I've had to rebuild everything, Mother. Do you know what people are saying? That I abandoned him. That I couldn't handle being a caretaker, as if that was ever my role." Clarissa handed her the glass. "You made the right choice. A woman like you shouldn't waste her prime years tethered to a man in a chair. You deserve to shine." Juliet sipped, the words soothing even as guilt pricked at her. "Still, the optics aren't great. The press loves a tragedy, and they've cast Michael as the poor billionaire betrayed by the shallow fiancée. I can't be the villain in this story." "Then don't be." Clarissa leaned forward, her manicured nails tapping the stem of her glass. "Reframe it. Make yourself the survivor. Say you chose your own future over his misfortune. People admire independence." Juliet considered this, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Yes. Independence. Freedom. That could work." Later that week, she tested the narrative at a trendy West Hollywood restaurant. Paparazzi flashed bulbs as she arrived with friends, the cameras devouring her sequined dress and carefully practiced smile. Over cocktails, she spoke loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Michael's condition is tragic, but I couldn't chain myself to misery. Life is short. Women need to put themselves first." By the next morning, gossip sites were buzzing. Some commenters applauded her honesty. Others condemned her, but Juliet didn't care. Attention was currency, and she had secured it again. Back at the mansion, Michael scrolled through the headlines, his expression grim. Maya stood at his shoulder, reading over his arm. She said nothing, but he could feel her disapproval radiating. Finally, he closed the tablet with a snap. "She's winning," he said quietly. "Not in truth, but in spectacle." "Spectacle fades," Maya replied. "Truth lasts." He looked at her, searching her face. "Do you believe that?" She nodded once. "I have to." The board, however, did not share Maya's faith. At the next video conference, the members pressed harder. "Her words are damaging, Michael," one man insisted. "Investors are skittish. They think you're fragile, abandoned, a liability. I am not a liability, Michael said, his voice steel. Then prove it, another board member challenged. Attend the next quarterly meeting in person. Show strength. Show you're still in control. No. After the call ended, Michael sat in silence, the weight of their demand pressing down. He could feel Maya's gaze on him, steady and patient. You don't have to perform for them, she said softly. But if I don't, they'll tear the company apart, he replied. Sometimes performance is survival. That evening, he found himself wheeling onto the terrace again, the city below glowing with relentless hunger. Maya joined him with Scout at her heel. She draped a blanket over his shoulders without being asked. Do you regret it? She asked suddenly. Regret what? Choosing to test her this way, living like this, letting the world see only weakness. Michael considered. Number because the truth came out. She showed herself. He paused, his voice dropping. But sometimes I regret that I saw it so clearly. Maya's hand brushed the edge of the blanket. Clarity isn't a curse. It's a gift, even if it hurts. No, her words lingered with him long into the night. Meanwhile, Juliet's public reinvention gathered speed. Fashion magazines began featuring her as a symbol of empowerment. Influencers reposted her quotes about self-priority. She launched a campaign with a skincare brand, her face glowing above the tagline, "Choose yourself." But behind the glossy veneer, doubt gnawed at her. Late one evening, after an exhausting photo shoot, she scrolled through comments online. Among the praise were sharp daggers. You abandoned him when he needed you. Gold digger. Maya Williams did more in one night than Juliet ever did in years. That last comment struck hardest. How did strangers even know Maya's name? Juliet threw the phone aside, fury twisting in her chest. She would not be overshadowed by a housemaid. The next morning, Clarissa called. Darling, you need to stay on message. Don't let the critics drag you down. They're jealous. Keep posting. Keep shining. No, but Juliet's thoughts circled back to Michael, to the house on the hill she had fled. She wondered if he had replaced her already. Wondered if the whispers about Maya held any truth. The idea infuriated her. Back at the mansion, Michael noticed Maya had been quieter than usual. She still brought the lemon water. Still managed his appointments. Still cared for Scout. But her humming had stopped. Something's wrong, he said one evening as she prepared dinner. She shook her head. It's nothing. Maya, he pressed gently. You never stop humming unless it's something. She hesitated, then confessed. I went to the market today. 2 women recognized me. They said my name. They asked if I was the one taking care of you. When I didn't answer, they smirked, like it was already a story they knew. Michael's jaw tightened. Juliet. She's feeding the press, Maya said softly, and now they're dragging me into it. Michael reached for her hand without thinking. She froze, startled, but didn't pull away. You've done nothing wrong, he said firmly. If anyone comes after you, they'll have to go through me. For a moment, they stayed like that, hands linked across the table. Then Scout barked, breaking the spell, and Maya withdrew gently, cheeks flushed. Later that night, as Michael wheeled himself back to his room, he thought about Juliet's world of cameras and curated words. He thought about Maya's quiet strength, her reluctance to be seen, her instinct to protect. The contrast sharpened the question that had haunted him for weeks. Which version of love was real? The one that glittered under lights, or the one that bled in silence? He knew the answer already. But admitting it to himself, to her, was a threshold he had not yet crossed. The storm broke on a Thursday morning. Michael had been up since dawn, pushing through therapy exercises in the mansion's gym. Maya counted softly under her breath as he strained against the resistance bands, sweat beating at his temples. Scout sat by the door, tail thumping encouragement. For a brief moment, Michael forgot the cameras outside the gates, the whispers in the boardroom, even Juliet's voice echoing in glossy magazines. He only heard Maya's quiet rhythm, 8, 9, 10, but the peace didn't last. Grant Davis arrived mid-morning with a newspaper folded under his arm. His face was tight. His jaw clenched. Without a word, he laid the paper on Michael's lap. The headline stretched across the front page. Juliet declares, "End of engagement. I won't sacrifice my life." Beneath it was a photograph of Juliet at her mother's penthouse, glass of wine in hand, her smile soft but unyielding. The article quoted her directly. "I loved him once, but love cannot chain a woman to tragedy. He will have to find someone who accepts his condition. I choose my own future." Zir. Michael read the words slowly, each one a knife twisting deeper. He had known this was coming, known she would eventually make it public. Yet seeing it printed for the world carried a finality he hadn't been prepared for. His hands trembled slightly against the wheels of his chair. Maya stood a few feet away, silent. Her eyes lingered not on the paper but on his face. She saw the hurt he didn't show anyone else. Grant cleared his throat. "It's everywhere already, television, radio, social feeds. Investors are jittery. They're calling for statements, for reassurance. The board will meet in 72 hours. They want you present, in person." Michael folded the paper and set it aside. His voice was calm but hard. "Then I'll be there." "Michael," Grant began, but Michael cut him off with a look. After the lawyer left, the silence stretched between Michael and Maya. Finally, she spoke. "I'm sorry." He shook his head. "Don't be." She only said aloud what she'd already decided the night she walked out. He looked down at his hands, flexing them slowly. "But it hurts more to see it. Celebrated. To be reduced to a headline." Maya stepped closer. "Headlines don't last. People forget. Do they?" His gaze lifted to hers. "Or do they just move on to the next spectacle, leaving you defined by what came before?" She held his eyes, steady. "Then you have to define yourself louder than they do." Mull. That night, Michael didn't sleep. He sat in the study with Scout curled at his feet, staring out at the lights of the city. Every so often he thought he saw a camera flash from beyond the gates, hungry for a glimpse of the man Juliet had cast aside. He felt the weight of pity pressing against him, heavier than the chair itself. But then he remembered Maya's words, "Define yourself louder than they do." The next morning, he called his father. The elder Johnson listened without interruption, as Michael described the article, the board's demands, the rising tension. Finally, his father spoke. "Son, you asked for clarity. You have it. Juliet has closed her chapter. Now the world waits to see if you'll close yours or let them close it for you." Michael gripped the phone tighter. "And if I'm not ready?" His father's voice softened. "Then lean on the one who has already proven she won't leave you. She's closer than you think." "Man." After the call, Michael wheeled himself into the kitchen. Maya was at the counter slicing vegetables, her hair pulled back loosely, Scout watching her with eager eyes. She looked up, startled when she saw him, then smiled faintly. "You should rest," she said. "I've rested enough." He paused, watching her hands move deftly with the knife. "Maya, would you come with me to the board meeting?" She blinked. "Me?" "Yes. They'll see strength if you're there. Not just mine. Yours. You've been holding this place together more than anyone knows." Her lips parted, but she didn't answer right away. Finally, she set the knife down. "If that's what you want, I'll come." The day of the meeting arrived with the city buzzing louder than ever. Outside the corporate headquarters downtown, cameras clustered like vultures, reporters shouting questions as Michael's car pulled up. He emerged in his wheelchair, tailored suit crisp, expression steady. Maya walked beside him, her posture straight, her presence calm. Scout trotted faithfully at his side. The boardroom was cold and gleaming, walls lined with glass. The directors shifted uncomfortably as he rolled in, but no one spoke until he reached the head of the table. Maya stood just behind him, silent but unshakable. Michael placed his hands on the table. "You've read the papers," he said evenly. "You've seen the headlines. But let me remind you, Juliet's decision does not define me, and it does not define this company. I am still here. I am still leading, and I will not allow pity or speculation to dismantle what we've built." There was a pause. Then one of the older directors, a man with silver hair and sharp eyes, leaned forward. "Words are easy, Michael. But the market doesn't trust words. They trust action. Michael met his gaze. Then watch my actions. Judge me by what I do, not by what she said. Oh, the meeting stretched for hours, filled with charts, forecasts, tense debates. Through it all, Maya remained in the corner, unnoticed by most. But Michael felt her presence like an anchor. Every time doubt flickered in the room, he remembered her voice telling him to define himself louder. When the meeting ended, the board was unsettled but not hostile. They hadn't ousted him, hadn't demanded he step aside. It was enough for now. As Michael and Maya left the building, cameras flashed wildly. Reporters shouted Juliet's name, demanded his response. Michael stopped briefly, turning his chair toward them. My private life is no longer up for debate, he said firmly. But my professional commitment is unchanged. I will continue leading, and I will not be defined by someone else's choice. Maya placed a hand lightly on his shoulder as they moved past the crowd. The touch was small, but it grounded him. That night, back at the mansion, Michael sat on the terrace with the city spread out below. Maya brought him tea, setting it on the table beside him. He reached for her hand before she could withdraw. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? She asked. For standing beside me when the world wanted me to fall. Her eyes softened. You didn't fall. You stood, just in a different way. For the first time since Juliet's departure, Michael felt the ache in his chest ease. He realized that the break, as public and painful as it had been, had also freed him. The spectacle was over. What came next would be his to define. The week after the board meeting felt like a fragile truce. The company hadn't collapsed. The board hadn't revolted, and investors hadn't stormed the gates. Michael carried himself with quiet determination, appearing at calls, reviewing documents, making decisions as though nothing had changed, but under the surface, tension coiled. He knew Juliet wouldn't stay silent forever. Maya sensed it too. She went about her daily routines with the same patience: lemon water at dawn, therapy sessions in the gym, Scout's leash ready for evening walks, but she had stopped humming again. Michael noticed. He always noticed. One evening, as they sat in the garden with the smell of jasmine heavy in the air, he asked, "Why don't you sing anymore?" Maya blinked. "Sing? You used to hum when you worked. It's been gone for days." "Man." She looked away. "I guess I don't feel much like music right now." "Because of Juliet?" Her silence was answer enough. That night, the answer arrived. Grant called past midnight, his voice clipped with urgency. "Michael, Juliet just filed a lawsuit." Michael straightened in his chair. "What grounds?" "She claims misrepresentation. Says you hid the extent of your condition from her, lured her into an engagement under false pretenses. She's demanding damages for emotional distress and reputational harm." Michael's throat tightened. "That's absurd." "It doesn't matter if it's absurd," Grant said grimly. "What matters is the narrative. She's framing herself as the victim now, and the press will devour it." After the call, Michael sat in the dim light of the study, fury and exhaustion colliding in his chest. Maya entered quietly, a robe pulled around her shoulders. "What happened?" He hesitated, then told her. Her eyes widened, but her voice was steady. "She's afraid." "Of what?" "Of being forgotten, of being replaced." Maya's tone was calm, but her hands clenched at her sides. "She sees that you're stronger without her. That scares her more than your weakness ever did." Michael stared at her. "You always cut to the truth." She shook her head. "I only see what's in front of me." The days that followed were chaos. News outlets ran with Juliet's lawsuit, plastering her face across every screen. Pundits debated whether Michael had manipulated her. Commentators dissected Maya's presence in the mansion, speculating about her role. Paparazzi staked out the gates, shouting questions about the mystery caretaker. One afternoon, as Maya returned from the market, a photographer shoved a camera in her face. "Are you the new woman in Michael Johnson's life? Did you replace Juliet?" Maya froze, groceries trembling in her arms. Before she could speak, the man snapped half a dozen photos. She hurried inside, cheeks burning. Michael was waiting in the foyer. When he saw her distress, his jaw hardened. "They crossed a line." "They'll keep crossing," Maya whispered. They don't see me as a person, just a headline. He wheeled closer, his voice firm. Then we'll protect you. Together. That evening, he drafted a statement with Grant. It was measured, dignified, but it carried steel. I have never misrepresented my condition. I face challenges, yes. But challenges do not define character. My engagement ended because love failed, not because truth did. The statement spread quickly. Some praised his candor. Others doubted. Juliet doubled down, appearing on a talk show with her mother. Clarissa clasped her daughter's hand as Juliet's voice broke theatrically. I was blindsided, she told the host. I thought we were building a future together. Instead, I was left with betrayal and humiliation. Maya watched the interview from the kitchen, fists clenched. She turned off the television before Michael could see more. But he had already caught enough of Juliet's practiced tears. Later, as he sat on the terrace, he said quietly, "She's rewriting history." Maya's voice was firm. "History only sticks if you let her write the last page." Michael turned to her. "Then help me write mine." The words slipped out before he could second-guess them. For a moment, the night held its breath. Maya froze, her eyes wide. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, searching for words. Finally, she whispered, "I already am." The lawsuit dragged on for weeks, a circus of filings and counters, headlines and speculation. Through it all, Maya's presence became Michael's shield. She accompanied him to therapy, fielded reporters at the gate, even intercepted packages filled with cruel letters. She bled once more this time, a cut from broken glass in the mail, but dismissed it with her usual steadiness. "You can't keep sacrificing yourself for me," Michael told her one night as he helped her bandage her hand. She smiled faintly. "It's not sacrifice. It's choice." He stared at her, the truth settling heavy in his chest. Juliet had spoken of sacrifice as a burden. Maya spoke of choice as love. The difference was everything. When the first court hearing arrived, Michael insisted on appearing in person. The courtroom buzzed with cameras and whispers as he rolled to the front, Maya walking beside him, Scout close at his heel. Juliet sat across the aisle, flawless in a tailored suit, her mother at her side. She didn't look at him once. The judge called order. The proceedings began. Allegations flew. Lawyers sparred. The press scribbled every word. Through it all, Michael kept his gaze steady, anchored by the quiet presence beside him. During a recess, Juliet finally looked his way. For a flicker of a moment, her eyes betrayed something: regret, anger, fear. Michael couldn't tell. But when he glanced at Maya, standing firm at his side, he realized he didn't need to. The choice had already been made. That night, back at the mansion, exhaustion pressed heavy, yet Michael felt lighter than he had in weeks. The war wasn't over, but he had crossed another line. He had faced her, not as the broken man she painted him to be, but as the man who refused to let her define him. Maya brought him tea, her hands still faintly bandaged. He looked at her and said simply, "You're the reason I can keep standing, even when I can't walk." Her eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Instead, she sat beside him in the quiet, the city's noise distant, their silence stronger than any headline. The morning after the first hearing, the air in Los Angeles felt heavier, as though the whole city leaned in to watch the battle unfold. Michael sat in his study, the curtains drawn, the headlines glowing on his tablet. Every outlet carried Juliet's face, her hand delicately touching her temple as she left the courthouse. The captions all told the same story: heartbroken fiancé betrayed by secrets. The image was immaculate, the words rehearsed. Maya entered quietly with the lemon water, setting it on the desk without comment. He watched her for a moment, the calm efficiency of her movements, the way her presence seemed to push back the storm. "She's winning the narrative," he muttered. Maya met his eyes. For now. Before he could answer, Scout barked sharply, ears pricked. Moments later, the doorbell rang, followed by the muffled voice of a guard. Maya moved to the foyer, returning with an envelope in her hand. She passed it to Michael, her brow furrowed. The letter was from Juliet's legal team. Inside was a thick packet of documents, photos, emails, fragments of private medical records. Michael skimmed them, his blood running cold. They were details only someone inside his home could have leaked. Dates of therapy sessions, private test results, even notes from Dr. Lane. She has everything, Michael said hoarsely. Things that should never have left this house. Mage's face paled. Someone betrayed you. He clenched his jaw. Not just me, us. That evening, Grant confirmed the worst. They've secured testimony from a former staff member, he said grimly over the phone. One of the night cleaners. They're claiming you exaggerated your paralysis for sympathy, that you orchestrated it to trap Juliet. It's fiction, but it will inflame public opinion. Michael stared out the window, fury simmering beneath his calm. She's not just fighting for money, she's fighting to erase me. After the call, silence stretched between him and Maya. She stood near the fireplace, her hands twisting in the fabric of her apron. What will you do? She asked finally. Michael turned his chair toward her. Fight, but not the way she expects. The next day, he summoned his father and Dr. Lane. They gathered in the study, the weight of history heavy in the air. His father's eyes were sharp, his voice steady. Son, you knew this might happen. You chose to test her, and she has chosen to retaliate. Now the question is, do you let her dictate the terms, or do you set your own? Michael leaned forward, his voice low. She wants to paint me as a fraud. Then I'll show her what truth looks like. He glanced at Maya. But I won't do it alone. Maya met his gaze, startled. Me? You've been my shield from the beginning, he said. Now I need you to be my witness. Her throat worked as she searched for words. Finally, she nodded. If that's what it takes. In the days that followed, Maya's role shifted. She accompanied him to strategy meetings, recounted her memories of Juliet's cruelty, provided testimony of the night she bled to protect him. Every detail strengthened their case, not only legally but morally. Still, the press twisted everything. Paparazzi hounded her at markets, reporters shouted her name at the gates. They painted her as the opportunist, the replacement. One afternoon, exhausted from the constant intrusion, she slammed the front door behind her and pressed her back against it. Michael found her there, trembling. They think I'm here because I want something, she whispered. They don't see the truth. Michael wheeled closer, his voice steady. Then let me tell them. She shook her head quickly. Number, that would only make it worse. Let them say what they want. I can take it. He studied her, the raw determination in her eyes. You shouldn't have to. But she did. And she continued. The betrayal deepened when Clarissa, Juliet's mother, released a carefully staged interview. She sat beneath the glow of a chandelier, pearls at her throat, her voice dripping with practiced sorrow. My daughter was deceived, she declared. She entered into an engagement with a man who wasn't honest about his health, who manipulated her loyalty. She's the victim here, and I will defend her with everything I have. The footage aired across every channel. When Michael saw it, he felt a familiar ache. Clarissa had always seen him as a stepping stone for her daughter, never as a man. Now she wielded influence like a blade. That night, Michael sat on the terrace with Maya beside him, the city stretched below, restless and bright. He spoke without looking at her. They'll never stop until they've destroyed both of us. Maya's voice was soft but firm. Then we won't stop either. He turned toward her. You say that as if it's simple. It is, she said. Because I made my choice long ago. He searched her face, the flicker of emotion she tried to hide. For the first time, he let himself consider the possibility his father had hinted at. That Maya wasn't just his caretaker, his shield, his ally. She was something more. Something Juliet had never been. The next day, the battle escalated further. Someone leaked a video clip grainy, stolen from a hidden camera showing Michael during therapy, his legs twitching faintly. The headlines screamed, "Proof he can walk. Johnson Empire and Deception Scandal." Michael watched the footage in silence, his face pale. Scout barked furiously at the screen, as though recognizing the betrayal. Maya's hands shook as she turned off the television. They twisted it, she whispered. They'll say you lied. Michael's voice was flat. They don't have to say it. They already believe it. For the first time, Maya saw despair crack through his composure. She knelt beside him, taking his hand in both of hers. "Listen to me," she said fiercely. "You are not a fraud. You are not weak. You are a man fighting harder than anyone I've ever known. If the world can't see that, then the world is blind." He looked down at her, at the tears shining in her eyes, at the steady grip of her hands. In that moment, he felt something shift inside him, not the flicker of muscle in his legs, but the deeper truth he had resisted. Juliet had betrayed him, but Maya had chosen him, again and again, without asking for anything in return. The betrayal from Juliet's camp had been meant to destroy him. Instead, it revealed something neither of them could ignore. That night, as the city buzzed with lies, Michael understood the line had been drawn. This was no longer just a legal battle. It was a fight for dignity, for truth, for love itself. And for the first time, he knew he wasn't fighting it alone. By the end of the week, the tabloids had shifted their focus. No longer was Juliet the sole star of the scandal. Now, her spotlight widened, casting its glare on Maya. The first headline appeared on a gossip blog. "Who is Maya Williams? The mystery woman behind Michael Johnson." Within hours, the article spread like wildfire. It painted Maya as an opportunist, dredging up fragments of her past, her brother's trouble with the law, the fact that she had worked service jobs since her teens, the insinuation that she had always been reaching above her station. Michael read the words with growing fury. "They're not just attacking me anymore," he said, his voice tight. "They're attacking you." Maya stood across the study, her arms folded. She had read the article too, though she refused to show how deeply it cut. "I told you this would happen," she said quietly. "They need a villain. And if Juliet is the victim, then I have to be the thief who stole her place." "You're not," Michael snapped. "You're the only one who's ever been real." She looked at him then, her eyes softening, but she shook her head. "The world doesn't care what's real, it only cares what's loud." The smear campaign escalated quickly. Photos of Maya at the market appeared online with mocking captions about her plain clothes. Commentators on talk shows speculated about her motives. One anchor leaned forward dramatically and said, "It looks suspicious, doesn't it?" The fiancé leaves, and suddenly the caretaker becomes indispensable. You have to wonder what really happened in that mansion. Michael threw the remote across the room when he saw it. The screen went black, but the rage remained. Scout barked at the sound of shattering plastic, then whined, unsettled. "Enough," Michael said, his voice raw. "I won't let them do this to you." Grant arrived the next morning with grim news. They're not stopping. Juliet's legal team leaked Maya's employment records. They want to frame her as someone who targeted you, who saw vulnerability and seized it. Michael's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "This isn't strategy anymore, it's cruelty." Grant nodded. "Yes, which is why you need to decide publicly. Do you acknowledge her as more than an employee, more than a caretaker? Or do you keep her role vague and hope the noise dies down?" The choice hung heavy. If he spoke openly, the speculation would only grow. If he stayed silent, Maya would be left exposed, defenseless. That evening, he found her in the garden, kneeling by the lemon trees. The sunset painted the sky in bruised colors, and she looked small against the sprawling city below. He wheeled closer, stopping a few feet away. "Maya," he began, his voice low, "I need to ask you something important." She brushed soil from her hands and looked up. "Go on. If I speak out, if I say what you mean to me, everything will change. They'll tear you apart harder than they already are. They'll twist your name until it's unrecognizable. Are you ready for that?" Her gaze held his, unwavering. "They already do it. Whether you speak or not, they've decided who I am. But the truth, is stronger than their stories." "No," he swallowed, his chest tight. "And what is the truth, Maya?" Her lips parted, and for a moment he thought she might say it, that word neither of them had dared to speak aloud. But instead, she whispered, "The truth is, I chose to stay. That's all that matters." The next day, Michael made his decision. He arranged for a press conference at the Foundation's headquarters, against Grant's cautious advice. The room filled with reporters, cameras, and flashing lights. Michael sat at the front, Maya at his side. She wore no designer dress, no jewels, only a simple blouse and steady eyes. When the questions began, they were merciless. "Mr. Johnson, did you deceive Juliet about your condition? Is Maya Williams your new partner? Did she manipulate you into replacing Juliet?" Michael raised his hand, silencing the room. His voice was calm but firm. "Enough. I will answer directly. Maya Williams did not deceive anyone. She has been my caretaker, yes, but she has also been my anchor. When others abandoned me, she stayed. She shielded me when glass was thrown, when words were sharper than knives, when the world wanted me to fall. She did not manipulate me. She saved me." The room buzzed with murmurs, cameras flashing like lightning. Reporters shouted follow-ups, but Michael's words hung heavier than their noise. Afterward, as they left through a side entrance, Maya walked silently beside him. In the car, she finally spoke. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said softly. "I did." The fallout was immediate. Some headlines mocked him. "Billionaire falls for the help." Others praised his candor. "Johnson defends devoted caretaker." Juliet responded with another round of interviews, feigning pity. "It's sad, really," she told one host. "He's clinging to the one person left." But is that love or desperation? When Michael saw the clip, his anger threatened to consume him. But Maya touched his arm lightly. "Let her talk. Words don't change what happens here," she said, gesturing to the mansion around them. Still, the smear weighed on her. One evening, Michael found her sitting alone in the kitchen, Scout's head on her lap. Her eyes were red, though she tried to hide it. "What is it?" he asked gently. She shook her head. "I can take their lies, but I can't stand the thought of dragging you down with me." He wheeled closer, reaching for her hand. "You're not dragging me down, Maya. You're the only reason I'm still standing at all." Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat the world outside the lawsuits, the cameras, Juliet's venom fell away. It was just them, the quiet kitchen, the dog at their feet, the unspoken truth between them. That night, as he looked out at the restless city, Michael understood the war had shifted. Juliet thought she could break him by breaking Maya, but she had underestimated the bond forged in blood, silence, and small kindnesses. For the first time, Michael no longer feared the smear. He feared only one thing, that Maya might believe the lies herself, and he knew he would spend every breath proving to her that the truth they shared was stronger than any scandal. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation the morning Maya Williams was called to the stand. Reporters lined the back rows, their pens ready, their cameras forbidden but their memories sharp. Juliet sat with her legal team, pristine in a cream suit, her expression a carefully crafted mask of wounded dignity. Her mother, Clarissa, was beside her, pearls glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. Michael wheeled into his place at the defense table, his heart pounding harder than it had during any board meeting or press conference. He had faced hostile investors and ruthless rivals, but nothing felt as personal as this moment. Maya adjusted her blouse nervously, then took her seat on the witness stand. The bailiff swore her in, and silence settled like a held breath. Juliet's lawyer, a sharp-jawed man named Fletcher, rose first. He paced deliberately before turning to her. "Miss Williams, you've been in Mr. Johnson's employment since the accident, correct?" "Yes," Maya answered, her voice steady though her fingers gripped the railing. "And in that role, you've had access to his private life. His home, his medical information." "That's true," she admitted. Fletcher leaned forward. "Would you say you've grown close to Mr. Johnson?" Maya hesitated. The courtroom seemed to lean in. "Yes, I've cared for him daily." "No, closer than an employee usually becomes?" Fletcher pressed, his tone dripping insinuation. Juliet's lips twitched into a small, satisfied smile. Maya's throat tightened, but she held her ground. "Closer, perhaps, because I stayed when others left." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Fletcher straightened. "Ah, you mean when Miss Juliet Campbell, his fiancée, left." He paused for effect. "Tell me, Miss Williams, did you anticipate that by staying, you might one day replace her, perhaps in his affections, his fortune?" Maya's eyes flashed, but she kept her voice calm. "I didn't stay for fortune. I stayed because he needed someone. And because loyalty matters. Fletcher smirked, sensing opportunity. Loyalty or ambition? You're a young woman. Modest means no family name to protect you. Isn't it true that you saw in Mr. Johnson not just a patient, but a path out of obscurity? Before Maya could answer, Michael's attorney objected. The judge sustained, but the seed was planted. The murmurs grew louder. Fletcher backed away with a shrug, satisfied. No further questions. Michael's lawyer, a composed woman named Evelyn Carter, approached next. She smiled warmly at Maya, softening the tension. Miss Williams, when you say you stayed because loyalty matters, can you tell the court what that loyalty looked like, in real terms? Maya's eyes glistened, but her voice steadied. It looked like cleaning up broken glass after Juliet threw it. It looked like bleeding on his floor because I put myself between them. It looked like bringing water every morning, helping him fight through therapy, listening when no one else would. That's loyalty, not ambition. The room stilled. Even the reporters stopped scribbling for a moment. Evelyn nodded. And did you ever ask for compensation beyond your wages? No, Maya answered firmly. I never asked for anything. Then why? Evelyn pressed gently. Why stay? Maya's gaze drifted to Michael. Their eyes met, and though the courtroom brimmed with noise, it felt like silence wrapped around them. She drew a breath. Because I couldn't walk away from someone who needed me. Because leaving would have meant betraying myself. Michael felt the words in his chest like a heartbeat. The judge cleared her throat, reminding everyone of the formality of the setting. Evelyn thanked Maya and returned to her seat. When recess was called, Juliet swept from the courtroom, her heels striking like gunfire against marble. Clarissa followed, whispering furiously. The cameras outside pounced as they left, their image feeding the cycle of headlines once more. Back inside, Michael wheeled over to Maya. She stood near the witness stand, shoulders stiff, hands trembling now that the ordeal was over. He lowered his voice. You were brilliant. She shook her head. They twisted everything. They'll keep twisting. He reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. They can twist the words, but they can't twist the truth I saw when you spoke. Everyone in that room felt it. Her breath caught, her eyes searching his. For a moment, the chaos outside seemed far away. Later that evening, back at the mansion, exhaustion weighed heavy. Scout curled at Maya's feet as they sat in the kitchen, a pot of tea between them. Michael studied her across the table. She looked smaller than usual, worn down, yet there was fire in her still. You risked everything today, he said softly. So did you, she replied. But you didn't have to. Yes, she said firmly. I did, because truth isn't truth if it's hidden. The words lingered long after the tea cooled. News coverage exploded overnight. Some praised Maya as a woman of integrity, the caretaker who had spoken with unshakable honesty. Others sneered, parroting Juliet's narrative that she was an opportunist. Social media divided into camps: number Team Juliet, number Team Maya. The war of perception had reached its peak. Michael's father called the next morning. Son, I watched the testimony. That woman Maya, she spoke more truth in 5 minutes than Juliet has in her lifetime. Don't let the noise distract you. Hold to it. Michael hung up the phone, his heart steadier. He found Maya in the garden, Scout bounding at her side. She looked up when she saw him, her smile tired but real. You survived, he said simply. So did you, she answered. He wheeled closer, his voice low. Maya, I realized something in that courtroom. When you spoke, it wasn't just for me. It was for us. And I don't ever want to hide that again. Her eyes widened, uncertainty flickering. Misha, but before she could answer, Scout barked sharply, breaking the moment. They both laughed softly, the tension easing. Still, the truth hung between them, undeniable, waiting for its moment. That night, as the city pulsed with gossip, Michael sat awake in his study. The betrayal had deepened, the smear had sharpened, but Maya had stood tall. He knew the road ahead would be harsher still. Juliet wouldn't back down. Clarissa wouldn't stop pulling strings. But he also knew this. He had faced his darkest moment, and Maya had chosen to stand beside him. And that choice, repeated day after day, was stronger than any lie. The morning after Maya's testimony, the air around the mansion seemed sharper, brittle with tension. Paparazzi crowded the gates, their voices carrying even through the thick glass windows. Michael tried to drown them out, focusing instead on therapy exercises. Scout watched from his rug while Maya counted softly, her voice steady despite the storm outside. But when the session ended, Grant called with a warning. "Michael, you need to be careful. Juliet's team isn't finished. I've been hearing whispers someone's been paying people around the neighborhood for information. Photographers, delivery drivers, even your security detail." Michael's stomach tightened. "They're digging for anything." "Anything," Grant confirmed. "And if they can't find it, they'll invent it." After the call, Michael wheeled himself into the kitchen where Maya was preparing lunch. She looked up, instantly reading his face. "What's wrong?" "They're coming after us harder," he said grimly. "Not just in court. In every corner of our lives." Maya's hand stilled on the cutting board. "Then we hold the corners tighter." Her calm steadiness soothed him, but it didn't erase the gnawing dread. He had lived his adult life fighting corporate sharks, but this was different. This was personal, and the target was no longer just him. That evening, the first sign arrived. As Maya walked Scout along the quiet street outside the mansion, a black SUV slowed beside her. The window rolled down, and a man's voice called, "Careful, sweetheart. You don't want to end up on the wrong side of a headline." Maya froze, clutching Scout's leash tighter. Before she could respond, the car sped off, leaving only exhaust fumes and a lingering threat. She returned pale, her hands trembling despite her attempt to hide it. Michael met her at the door, worry flaring in his chest when he saw her face. "What happened?" "Nothing," she tried, but her voice faltered. "Maya." His tone was sharp, demanding the truth. She exhaled shakily. "A car slowed down. Someone warned me." Michael's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. That wasn't a warning. That was intimidation. He immediately called the head of security, ordering increased patrols. Cameras doubled. No one in or out without clearance. But even as he gave commands, rage burned in him. Juliet had escalated beyond words and lawsuits. She had invited danger into Maya's world. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He sat in the study, staring out at the city lights. Maya appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a cardigan. "You're awake," she said softly. "So are you." "No." She came closer, settling into the armchair opposite him. "It's not your fault." "Yes, it is," he snapped before he could stop himself. "They target you because of me, because you stayed." Her eyes held his. "And if I left, would that make you safer?" The question struck deep. He looked away, his jaw tight. "It might, but you'd be alone," she said simply. "And that's worse than danger." He closed his eyes, her words settling heavy in his chest. "You shouldn't have to choose between your safety and me." "Maybe I already did," she whispered. Silence followed, thick with meaning neither dared to voice aloud. The next day brought another escalation. A tabloid published grainy photos of Maya on her walk, Scout at her side. The caption read, "Caretaker or conspirator. The woman at the center of Johnson's scandal." The article painted her as manipulative, hinting that her testimony had been rehearsed, her loyalty bought. Michael slammed the paper down. "Enough," he growled. "They can drag me through the mud, but I won't let them destroy you." Grant tried to calm him. "Michael, if you lash out publicly, you'll feed the fire. We need strategy, not rage." But Michael's patience was fraying. The chair beneath him might have limited his legs, but not his fury. That evening, as reporters shouted outside the gates, Michael wheeled onto the terrace with Maya beside him. He looked out at the city, the lights blinking like watchful eyes. "I'm done letting them control the story," he said. Maya glanced at him. "What will you do?" "Tell the truth louder than their lies." He turned to her, his voice low but fierce. "And I won't let you stand alone in this anymore." Her breath caught, eyes wide. "Michael," before she could finish, Scout barked sharply, ears pricked toward the gate. A commotion rose outside, shouts, the metallic slam of a camera against the fence. Security rushed to intervene. Michael wheeled forward instinctively, but Maya placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. "Don't," she urged. "That's what they want. A scene." He exhaled hard, forcing himself to stop. Still, his gaze burned toward the noise. They want to rattle us, but they don't understand. They're only making me stronger. Later that night, as the house quieted, Maya brought him tea. Her hands trembled slightly as she set it down, and he caught them in his. "You don't have to be brave every moment," he said softly. Her eyes glistened. "If I'm not, who will be?" He squeezed her hands gently. "Me." The words slipped out without thought, but once spoken, they settled like truth. Maya's breath caught, and for a heartbeat, the noise outside seemed to fade. It was just them, two souls weathering a storm that had grown darker than either had anticipated. Michael knew Juliet's escalation marked a turning point. This was no longer about reputation or money. It was about power, about intimidation, about forcing them to break. But as he looked at Maya, her tired eyes, her quiet strength, her hand still in his, he realized something Juliet could never understand. Breaking them was impossible, because their bond was already stronger than fear. And for the first time since the accident, Michael didn't just feel like a man defending his dignity. He felt like a man ready to fight for someone else's. The tension that had settled over the mansion after the SUV incident never lifted. Security doubled its patrols. Cameras scanned every corner, but the sense of danger clung to the air like smoke. Michael noticed it in the way Maya checked the locks twice at night, in the way Scout barked at the slightest sound, in the way he himself woke in the dark hours, listening for footsteps that never came. It was on a Thursday morning that the accident happened. Michael was scheduled for a physical therapy session at a rehabilitation center across town. His doctor insisted he leave the mansion occasionally to practice mobility in real-world settings. Michael had agreed reluctantly, knowing paparazzi would swarm, but he didn't expect what was waiting. The SUV rolled smoothly through the city, tinted windows shielding him and Maya from flashing cameras. Scout rested at Maya's feet, ears twitching. Michael tried to focus on the papers Grant had sent along, but unease gnawed at him. When the car slowed at an intersection, he glanced up. A delivery truck barreled toward them from the cross street, brakes screaming, horn blaring. The impact came before he could react. Metal crunched, glass shattered. The SUV jolted violently sideways. Maya cried out, throwing her arms across Michael's chest as Scout howled in terror. The airbags deployed with a thunderous pop, choking the air with smoke and powder. When the vehicle finally skidded to a halt against the curb, silence followed, broken only by Scout's frantic barking. Michael's ears rang. But his first thought was Maya. She was slumped against him, blood trickling from a cut above her brow. He fumbled with the belt, ignoring the ache in his arms, his heart hammering. "Maya, Maya, talk to me." Her eyes fluttered open, dazed but conscious. "I'm here," she whispered hoarsely. Relief crashed over him, but it was quickly replaced by fury. The truck driver stumbled out, protesting that his brakes had failed. Yet something about the scene reeked of orchestration. Michael had lived too long in a world of power plays to mistake coincidence. By the time paramedics arrived, reporters were already gathering, cameras flashing as they shouted questions. Michael shielded Maya as best he could, barking orders at security to clear a path. The sight of her blood ignited something in him, something deeper than anger, a vow forming silently in his chest. At the hospital, doctors stitched Maya's wound and declared her otherwise stable. Michael refused to leave her side, gripping her hand even as nurses fussed. When she tried to protest, he silenced her with a look. "I nearly lost you," he said quietly once the room emptied, "and I won't let that happen again." She reached for his hand with her uninjured one, her voice steady despite her pallor. "You didn't lose me. I'm right here." That night, after she was discharged and returned to the mansion, Michael gathered his father, Grant, and the head of security. His voice was sharp, cold with resolve. This wasn't an accident. Juliet's team escalated beyond lawsuits and headlines. They put her in danger, my family. That ends now. Grant rubbed his temples. If we accuse them without proof, it will backfire. The press will call it paranoia. Then we find proof, Michael snapped. I don't care how. Hire investigators, subpoena records, trace the truck's maintenance. Someone signed off on those brakes. Someone paid for silence. Follow the money. His father watched him, nodding slowly. That's the man I know. Not the victim they want you to be. After the meeting, Michael returned to Maya's side. She was in the kitchen, stubbornly preparing tea despite the bandage on her forehead. He wheeled closer, his eyes locked on her. You should be resting, he said. She smiled faintly. And let you drink hospital coffee all night? Not a chance. His throat tightened. He reached for her hand, his voice low. Maya, this is my fault. They came after you to get to me. She shook her head firmly. This isn't your fault. This is what people do when they're afraid of losing control. They try to scare you. But fear only works if you let it. He studied her, struck again by her courage. You could leave. You know. Walk away from all of this. From me. It would be safer. Her hand squeezed his. I made my choice long ago. I'm not walking away. The silence between them deepened, filled with unspoken truths. For the first time, Michael let himself lean into it, let himself believe it. The following morning, news of the crash dominated headlines. Some outlets framed it as a tragic accident, others as a suspicious incident. Conspiracy theories swirled. Juliet's name whispered, though never spoken outright. When reporters shoved microphones toward her at a charity gala, she simply pressed her hand to her heart and said, I only hope Michael and his companion recover swiftly. No one deserves such misfortune. The hypocrisy boiled Michael's blood. Watching her on the screen, he clenched his fists. She knows exactly what happened, and she smiles. Maya turned off the television. Let her smile. We'll fight in ways she can't. Later that day, investigators reported back. The truck's brakes had indeed failed, but the records showed deliberate tampering bolts loosened. Safety checks bypassed. No direct link to Juliet's camp yet, but the trail had begun. Michael vowed to follow it to the end. That night, as the city pulsed with gossip, Michael wheeled himself onto the terrace. Maya joined him, Scout at her heel. The bandage on her forehead glowed pale in the moonlight. He turned to her, his voice raw. I thought the chair was my greatest burden, but today I realized it isn't. It's the fear of losing you. Her breath caught, and for once, she didn't look away. Michael, but the words failed, hanging in the night between them. For the first time since the accident, Michael didn't feel like a man trapped in weakness. He felt like a man standing on the edge of something stronger than fear, stronger than betrayal. Love, raw and undeniable, had finally broken through, and he knew the fight ahead was no longer just about dignity or empire. It was about protecting the woman who had chosen him when the world turned away. The morning after the crash, the mansion stood like a fortress. Security had tightened its grip. Guards rotating at every corner, surveillance feeds monitored without pause. Yet inside, the air felt softer, quieter, as though the chaos outside had finally pushed Michael and Maya into a fragile cocoon of truth. Michael sat in the breakfast nook, sunlight spilling across the table. His tablet lay untouched. Scout rested at his feet, his ears flicking each time a guard's radio crackled in the distance. When Maya entered with the familiar glass of lemon water, her bandage catching the light, Michael's chest tightened. You should be resting, he said gently. She smiled faintly. We've already argued about that. But as she set the glass down, he caught her wrist lightly. Maya. She stilled, surprised. His voice was quiet but firm. Last night, when I thought I might lose you, something broke open inside me. I can't keep it in any longer. Her lips parted, a flicker of fear and hope mingling in her eyes. Michael. He released her wrist slowly, not wanting to trap her. You've been my shield. My voice when I had none. My anchor when the world tried to pull me under. You stayed when no one else did. And somewhere in all of that, I stopped seeing you as just my caretaker. I see you as the reason I'm still fighting. Silence filled the room. Scout let out a low sigh, as if punctuating the weight of the words. Maya sank into the chair across from him, her hands folded tightly. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then her voice came soft, trembling. Do you know what it's like to love someone quietly? To love them in every action, every small moment, but never dare to say it? Michael's heart thudded. Yes, he whispered. Her eyes glistened. Because that's what I've been doing, Michael. From the first day you looked at me not as staff but as a person. Every glass of water, every bandage, every step beside your chair, it wasn't just duty, it was love, and I thought I'd carry it silently forever. The confession hung between them, fragile yet undeniable. Michael wheeled closer, his voice low and steady. Then let's stop carrying it in silence. Her breath caught. For a moment she looked as though she might pull back, overwhelmed by the weight of their truths. But then she reached across the table, her hand slipping into his. It was warm, steady, trembling with unspoken promise. They sat like that for a long while, the noise of the world fading outside the mansion walls. But the world did not stay away for long. Later that day, Grant arrived with updates. He dropped a stack of papers onto the study desk, his face drawn. Juliet's lawyers are accelerating. They've filed a motion demanding Maya's communications, her financial records, even testimony about her brother's past. They're trying to smear her further, paint her as unstable, untrustworthy. Michael's fury flared. She has nothing to do with this. She's innocent. Grant nodded. That's not the point. They don't need truth, Michael. They just need noise. If they can drag her through the mud, they weaken you. Michael looked at Maya, who stood silently in the corner, her face pale but resolute. Then let them try, she said quietly. I'm not afraid of their lies. But Michael was. Not for himself, for her. That evening, as the city buzzed with headlines, he found her in the garden, trimming the lemon trees with careful hands. He wheeled beside her, watching the fading light dance across her face. They'll use every weapon they can, he said softly, and I hate that you're in their sights because of me. She shook her head. Michael, I chose this. I chose you. Every scar, every headline, every whisper, it's the price of standing by someone I love. The word struck him deeply. Love. Spoken now not as confession alone, but as a vow. He reached for her hand again. Then hear me when I say this. I love you too, not out of gratitude, not out of desperation, but because you are the truest thing in my life. Her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, she seemed unable to speak. Then she leaned closer, her forehead brushing his. Scout whined softly at their feet, as if guarding the moment. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but it was enough. Enough to shatter the silence that had bound them for so long. The next day, the headlines shifted again. Photos from the accident splashed across tabloids, showing Michael's SUV mangled, Maya's forehead bandaged. Some outlets speculated about foul play. Others framed it as bad luck. Juliet gave another carefully staged interview, offering her prayers while slyly questioning whether Maya had been a distraction behind the wheel. When Michael saw it, he laughed bitterly. She can twist anything. Maya touched his shoulder gently. Let her. We know the truth. But as the days passed, the pressure mounted. Court hearings loomed, the smear campaign thickened, and whispers grew louder. Through it all, Michael and Maya found strength in each other in the late-night talks, the small touches, the quiet presence that no camera could capture. One evening, as they sat on the terrace, Michael spoke the words aloud for the first time. Whatever happens, Maya, lawsuits, threats, headlines, I want you to know this. I won't let them tear us apart. Not now, not ever. She leaned into him, her hand resting lightly on his. Then we'll fight together. The city sprawled below, restless and hungry. But for the first time since the accident, Michael didn't feel outnumbered. He felt unstoppable. Because beside him was the one person who had chosen him not for power, not for wealth, not for image, but for love. And that love, raw and unshakable, was stronger than any storm Juliet could conjure. The courthouse loomed like a fortress that morning, its marble steps crawling with reporters, cameras flashing as though each bulb were a lightning strike. Michael's SUV pulled to the curb, and when the door opened, the frenzy doubled. Paparazzi shouted questions, microphones jutted like weapons, voices drowned each other out. Michael, did you fake your condition? Maya, are you replacing Juliet? Is this all about money? Michael emerged in his chair, wearing a tailored navy suit that fit like armor. His jaw was set, his eyes steady. Maya walked at his side, Scout close at her heel. The scar on her forehead was faint now, but visible, a reminder of what she had endured. She ignored the cameras, her hand brushing the back of his chair briefly. a quiet anchor in the storm. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with the same fever. Juliet sat at the plaintiff's table, flawless in a black sheath dress, her hair swept into a chignon, her mother's hand resting theatrically on her arm. Their attorney, Fletcher, organized papers with meticulous precision. They looked like royalty wronged, polished, and ready to strike. Michael's attorney, Evelyn Carter, leaned down beside him. "Remember, they'll go for blood today. Stay calm. Let Maya's truth speak louder than their lies." "One." He nodded once, his gaze shifting to Maya. She gave him a small smile, the kind that steadied him more than any strategy. The judge entered. Proceedings began. Fletcher wasted no time. He rose dramatically, his voice carrying, "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen, today we prove not just betrayal, but deception. Mr. Johnson misled my client about his health, about his future, and in doing so, trapped her in a union built on falsehood. And when she sought her freedom, he replaced her with someone who had been waiting in the wings, eager to profit from his fortune. This is not love. This is manipulation." Gasps rippled through the gallery. Juliet lowered her eyes, playing the part of wounded woman. Clarissa dabbed at the corner of her eye with a silk handkerchief. When it was Evelyn's turn, she stood tall, her voice calm but cutting. "My client is guilty of one thing only, being human. He suffered tragedy, faced abandonment, and yet continued to lead, to endure. And while others fled at the first sign of hardship, one woman remained not for profit, not for power, but for loyalty. That is not manipulation, that is truth, and it is stronger than any lie spun here today." The battle raged for hours. Witnesses testified, documents were presented, arguments flared, but the heart of the trial arrived when Juliet herself took the stand. Fletcher guided her gently. "Juliet, tell us in your own words why you left." She tilted her head, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "Because I was deceived. I believed Michael would recover, that we had a future. But he hid the truth. And when I realized, I couldn't sacrifice my life. No woman should." Fletcher nodded gravely. "And when you left, what did you discover?" Her eyes flicked toward Maya. "That she had already taken my place. That while I was grieving, she was moving in." The courtroom buzzed. Maya's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She approached slowly, her eyes sharp. "Juliet, did you or did you not throw a glass ornament at Michael during an argument?" Juliet's composure faltered. I was upset. Anyone would have been." "Yes or no?" Evelyn pressed. "Yes," Juliet snapped. "And did Miss Williams not place herself between you and Michael, resulting in injury?" Juliet's silence said everything. The gallery murmured. Evelyn leaned closer. "So the truth, Miss Campbell, is not that Maya replaced you. It's that Maya protected him when you attacked him. Isn't that correct?" Juliet flushed crimson, her mask cracking. Clarissa stiffened, whispering furiously. But the damage was done. Finally, it was Maya's turn again. She returned to the stand, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze unwavering. Evelyn asked softly, "Maya, why did you stay?" Maya glanced at Michael, then back at the judge. Her voice was steady, clear. "Because loyalty matters. Because he mattered. Not as a billionaire, not as a patient, but as a man. And I would rather be called a fool for loving him than a liar for abandoning him." The words hung in the air like a bell tolling truth. Even the judge seemed moved, her gavel still in her hand. Fletcher tried to dismantle her testimony, but every attempt fell flat. The sincerity in Maya's voice could not be faked, could not be spun. And when she stepped down, Michael's heart surged with a pride he hadn't felt in years. Closing arguments came swiftly. Fletcher thundered about deception, manipulation, betrayal. Evelyn countered with dignity, endurance, truth. When the judge finally retired to deliberate, the courtroom exhaled collectively, the weight of weeks pressing down. Outside, the city held its breath. Hashtags trended, talk shows speculated, news tickers flashed updates. Inside, silence reigned until the judge returned. Her voice was measured, authoritative. "Having reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the conduct of both parties. The court finds that Mr. Johnson did not engage in misrepresentation or fraud. The claims brought forth are dismissed. Furthermore, the court admonishes the plaintiff for actions that suggest personal malice rather than legal grievance. The gavel struck. It was over. Juliet's face twisted, her composure shattering for the first time. Clarissa clutched her arm, whispering furiously as reporters swarmed. Fletcher gathered papers quickly, his jaw tight with defeat. Michael exhaled slowly, the weight lifting from his chest. But his first thought was not victory, it was Maya. He turned his chair toward her. She stood at his side, her eyes glistening, her hand trembling slightly. "We won," she whispered. "No," he said softly. "We endured. Together. They left the courthouse through a side door, but cameras still caught them. This time, though, Michael didn't shy away. He reached for Maya's hand openly, threading his fingers through hers. The flashes exploded, reporters shouting, but he didn't care. For the first time, he wasn't hiding. Not his condition, not his truth, not his love. That night, back at the mansion, the air was different. The guards still patrolled. The headlines still buzzed. But inside, peace finally settled. Michael and Maya sat on the terrace. The city sprawled below like a restless child. Scout dozed at their feet, the lemon trees fragrant in the breeze. Michael turned to her, his voice low. "You gave them the truth today, but you gave me something greater. You gave me a future." Her eyes filled with tears. "So did you." And as the night deepened, the noise of the world fell away. What remained was simple, unshakable. Two people who had fought through betrayal, through lies, through danger, and found in each other the kind of love that no court, no scandal, no storm could undo. The story of Michael and Maya reminds us that love is not measured in wealth, glamour, or public approval. It is measured in loyalty, sacrifice, and truth. When the world turned against him, Michael discovered that the person who stood by his side in silence was worth more than those who praised him in the spotlight. And Maya, who gave without asking, proved that dignity is found not in titles but in choices. The lesson is clear. Loyalty outlives betrayal, compassion outshines cruelty, and true love is revealed not in comfort but in trial. In a society quick to judge and slow to see, it is often the quiet, steadfast souls who carry the greatest strength. In the end, justice is not always delivered by courts or headlines. It is delivered in the courage to stand by what is right, even when the world misunderstands you. And that kind of justice, born of loyalty and love, is the only one that lasts.